Right, let's get into it. Very, very warm welcome to you on this Thursday evening. You're at the Preparing for Sydney Uni Money Matters webinar. My name's Tyrone. I'm part of the Outreach and Access team, and you'll see some of our other guests as we go throughout the webinar, but let's get into it. I acknowledge the tradition of custodianship and the law of the country on which the University of Sydney campuses stand. I pay my respect to those who have cared and continue to care for country. And our main campus in Campdown that I'm on at the moment, this is the land of the Gadigal people. So as an overview of what you're going to be hearing about and looking at in this Money Matters webinar is things to do with money. So when we think about money, sometimes money comes in, sometimes money goes out. So we'll definitely be looking at the ins and outs. We'll be looking at the concept of budgeting, working what is going in, what is going out. And of course, when I refer to our special guests, that's some of our current University of Sydney students. And they're on here on this webinar tonight. They'll introduce themselves in a moment, but they'll also be there and they're ready and willing to answer any of your questions. And you can pop your questions into the Zoom function at the top of your Zoom browser there. It's some little speech bubbles that says Q&A, that's for question and answer. So if you've got any questions throughout, you can pop those in there and our student ambassadors will get those answered for you. Also, towards the end of our webinar tonight, our Money Matters webinar, we'll have a live question and answer. So that means I'll invite the student ambassadors on screen and we'll be able to answer your questions in real time. So definitely keep an eye out for that and have a think of any questions you want to get answered throughout. We'll go into some of the technical things. So you may be an E12 student or you may have heard of the My Sydney Scholarship and Scheme. We'll have a look at that. You may have heard that, there's money associated with your tuition at the university. We'll have a look at that. And sometimes money and finances can be stressful. So we'll look at some of the wellbeing supports at the University of Sydney for you. And then we'll wrap up with our live question and answer. So if you've just joined us, welcome to the Money Matters webinar. And of course, when we are dealing with finances, there is a difference between professional advice and this webinar is just general advice. So I'm just going to read this disclaimer for you so that you know what you can look out for in this session. So the information in this PowerPoint, it's for general information only. It should not be taken as constituting professional financial advice from the University of Sydney. The University of Sydney is not a financial advisor, and you should consider seeking independent financial or legal advice to check how this information relates to you or your unique circumstances. The University of Sydney is not liable for any loss caused, whether due to negligence or otherwise arising from the use of or reliance on the information provided directly or indirectly in this PowerPoint. So if the content of the webinar sparks any questions or any strategies in the work realm of finance for you, do seek professional advice from either a financial planner, financial counselor, or a financial advisor. Cool. So as mentioned, got some special guests with me and they will jump on screen in a moment. So as a reminder, my name is Tyrone and this is part of our Prep for Sydney University suite of webinars, and this is the Money Matters webinar. So I'd like to introduce Nate.
Hi everyone, my name is Nate. I'm currently doing fourth year law here at Sydney Uni. I did arts law, so I've just finished my arts degree and I did honours in that. So I'm in my fifth year of uni, and now I'm finishing off my degree this is my second last year of law, so I've got 1 year to go. I live on campus, hoping to go on exchange next year. I've got lots of Money Matters tips to give to you guys.
Awesome, thanks Nate. And we'll hear more from Nate a little later. I'd like to introduce and welcome Sydney.
Hi guys, I'm Sydney. I'm in my third year of studying a Bachelor of Design Computing and Advanced Studies where I major in marketing. Like Nate, I also hope to go on exchange, hopefully next year, and also have some tips to give everyone.
Excellent. Thanks, Sydney. Thanks, Nate. We'll see you later. So as a method, as a tool throughout this webinar, we want to keep you engaged. So we've got some poll questions. So you'll see those pop up on your screen. And I'm going to start off with poll question number 1. And you'll be able to respond by clicking the relevant answer for you on the screen. And then I'll be able to show you the results, anonymous results from the whole group of us here. And you'll be able to see what other people are thinking. So here we go. This is poll question number 1. So on a scale of 0 to 10, where do you rate your level of financial literacy? Are you at a 0? You know nothing and you're very glad to be in this session? Do you know a little bit? You're still keen for the session? Or are you kind of a bit of a boss and you're kind of 9, 10, basically an accountant? How are you feeling? All right, we've got our poll questions. All right, I'll give it one more moment. Okay, so 100% of you are telling us that you know a little bit and you're keen for this session. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're all keen for the session. Let's get into it. So in terms of literacy, we know that when we're studying at school, we've got literacy. So we have our English and our language lessons, and we have numeracy. So we get into our mathematics lessons. In the world, there's other kinds of literacy, though. There's computer literacy, so knowing how to interact and use computers. Science literacy, knowing all about things to do with science. And we also have financial literacy, which is things to do with money, things to do with the way humans interact with money. So if you have any questions coming out of this session, or if you're looking for some of those next steps or you want to get started with your financial literacy journey, these are 2 pretty solid places to start. Getting It Together, fantastic book. This was quite pivotal in terms of my own financial literacy journey. So I recommend that one. That one's by Noel Whittaker. He has a fairly regular articles in a number of Australian newspapers. So he's definitely written something like 5 to 10 books. So they're all to do with finance. So have a look there. Another one that is highly recommended is The Barefoot Investor. And Scott Pape is the author there. And so he goes into a lot of the more technical things, how to deal with credit cards and how to sort out your debt and things like that. So that might be something for you. And as a bonus, I definitely recommend you check out the moneysmart.gov.au website. This is the Australian government's website, which has all the technical terms, all the bits and pieces to do with money and finance. So I suggest you have a look at all 3 of those. Cool. We know that as you are preparing to transition to the University of Sydney, lots of things to think about. It can get a little bit overwhelming, a bit of a challenge to keep track of all the bits and pieces, all the things that you need to do, all the action you need to take. So we have a checklist. This will come out to you in our post-webinar communications, and you can use that PDF to tick off and to write any notes of the different actions you need to take between now and coming to join us at the University of Sydney. There's something like 50 to 60 things there. So some of them we'll talk about tonight, some of them you'll be able to have a reflect on, and if they are appropriate for you, then you'll be able to go ahead and action those. That checklist is designed to help you have the smoothest journey in terms of coming to join us at the University of Sydney. So look out for that one. In terms of the ins and outs and things to do with money, we know that the ins will be the income or ways to get money, and the expenses, the outs, will be things that we spend money on or money that is taken from us. A number of these we will have a look at throughout this webinar. We're definitely going to be having a look at income, and we'll definitely have a look at scholarships, gifts and prizes. That is, that's definitely good fortune if you can get a gift or a prize, but not super reliable in terms of an income. So we won't spend any time on that. Dividend and distributions, these are where if you have some investments in the stock market, as a reward for your investment, you can get some money from that. This is too technical for this webinar. So if you're interested in that, have a look at those financial literacy suggestions earlier and have a chat with a financial advisor or financial planner or counselor. In terms of our outs, we're absolutely going to be looking at living expenses, things like rent, groceries, utilities, your phone and internet, transport, and insurance. As part of having a balanced life, as part of balancing your studies, it's always important to have some fun. So that'll be expenses like meals out, entertainment. And if you're joining any of our more than 200 clubs and societies, some of those have fees associated with it. In terms of the technical side of our study costs, we've got HECS, and I'll explain what that is later. We've got the SSAF, Student Services and Amenities fee. I'll unpack that for you later on. You'll have expenses to do with your learning and your tuition, things like textbooks, study material and resources. And if you did science at university or you're looking at doing science at university like I did, you'll have to spend some money on equipment to keep you safe, things like eye goggles and your lab coats and lab gear. Something that does also get taken out of our income is tax. Touch on that only very lightly towards the middle of our webinar. So sometimes expenses are not planned, they are unexpected. Sometimes those unexpected expenses could be because of something you've lost. It could be because of, unfortunately, something has been stolen, so from theft. Sometimes things get old and they break down or they get damaged. Sometimes it might be an unfortunate injury. Sometimes it could be a natural calamity. And these are unexpected expenses or unexpected events that require you to spend some money on. So as an example, some of those would be, your trusty old faithful fridge is no longer keeping your food cool or cold and will need to be replaced. It could be the washing machine or the dryer has suddenly stopped working. And so when we are thinking about unexpected expenses, it's super important in your financial planning to have what's called an emergency fund. This is a little pot of money. It doesn't have to be a physical pot. You can keep it in a bank for sure. But the general suggestion is about 3 months of your living expenses as a backup. And so that's in case you find yourself without work, or you find that all of a sudden one of your white goods, so your fridge, your washing machine, has stopped working. And that emergency fund is to help fill the gap. So potentially you need to pay for a mechanic to fix the fridge or the washing machine, or you might even need a new one. Now, sometimes there's a time gap between insurance paying for your replaced items. And so that's where your emergency fund can come in handy. Also, sometimes you might be chewing on some Mentos or some Minties, and when your teeth starts to feel a little funny and you unexpectedly need to go to the dentist or the orthodontist. So it's not a planned expense. It's not something you've budgeted or allocated funds for. It's unexpected. So super important or valuable to have your emergency fund. So rather than having no savings or no emergency fund and going into a negative, having that emergency fund means you can dip into it as you need to. But once you've used some of or part of your emergency fund, do be sure to top it back up. So do have a plan to top that up from your income. That's unexpected expenses. We're going to be looking at expenses first. So that's unexpected. Now, living expenses. Number of things here. We've got rent, so you've got to have shelter. And so typically that'll be in the range of somewhere between $200 and $600 a week. I've got there highlighted, check for inclusions. So sometimes a rent will include things like water. Sometimes it even includes electricity. Sometimes if you're looking at university accommodation, sometimes your rent, your weekly cost for shelter includes a cleaner coming once or twice a week. So do have a look at the inclusions there. You've got groceries. So everyone, we've got to keep ourselves fit and healthy and be eating nutritional food and maintaining ourselves. So that's sustenance coming from our groceries or eating out. but our living expense, somewhere around $80 per week. Now, our utilities, these are things like water and electricity. It could also be gas as well. And so with that, it will typically be one bill for electricity, one bill for gas. And so you've got the two, and that typically comes out quarterly. So a quarter of a year is 3 months. So we'd expect that roughly every 3 months. You've got phone and internet. So you've got to be connected to your family, connected to your friends, connected to your community. But our phones also let us be organized. Your phone will tell you, as long as you've got your calendar there, it'll tell you when you need to be at class. It'll tell you when you've got assignments due. So it lets you be organized as well. So roughly, depending on how super specky your phone is, somewhere between $30 and $50 a month. And if you love Netflix and the streaming services, potentially more than that. Transport, roughly $8 a day, depending on where you are. And so with these costs, do remember that some of them you need to pay as you are using the service or the item, things like transport. You have to pay it to be able to get on to a bus or onto a train. Some of these expenses come out after you've used it. So you use your gas and electricity for 3 months, and then you get paid for what you used. So it's important to have a plan for when those expenses are going to be occurring, so that you've got funds ready and available. So do have a plan there, and we'll have a look at that as we go into budgeting. So on this transport, when you're thinking about accommodation, and we'll get into that in a moment, you may choose to spend a little more, but live closer to uni so that you can walk and you don't have to spend money on public transport. Or you might live a bit further away and choose to spend money on public transport rather than spending money on a car or a vehicle. So there are different things there for you to evaluate and to judge what's right for your own circumstances. For travel, if some of you are joining us from the regions, from our regional areas, coming to study with us, you will need to, in some way, shape or form, get from your region to Sydney to study. And so for that, you'll have a cost for that transport. As you are looking at, do investigate what's involved, when you need to be there, and look at how much you can take. Some of these transport services, you might only be able to carry like one backpack. Some of them you might, your restriction may be in terms of a weight or a volume. So do have a look at those technical details there. They're also going to need funds to get in and around Sydney. You can see we've got our light rail there on the left. We've got a cyclist in the middle, and we've got some of our Sydney buses in that right-hand image. There's a number of public transports in Sydney. We've got the light rail, we have trains, we've got buses, we've got the ferries as well. So have a think about how you might want to get in and out and around, and then have those funds available. We have the Opal card here in Sydney to tap on and tap off as an electronic jump on, jump off with the public transport. And some of those services do let you pay with a bank card or a credit card, as long as it's got the electronic chip there. In terms of accommodation, do research what accommodation that would be best for you, and then accommodation that you can reasonably afford. You're probably going to have a pretty tough time at uni if 100% of your income is going to accommodation. So have a think about something that you can reasonably afford, and evaluate with that in mind. And you want to be applying as soon as possible. Some of the colleges have closed or their applications already, but apply as soon as possible, so that way you've got more time to plan up your sleeve. And then if you're an E12 or a regional remote or a low SES student, have a look, because some of the accommodation scholarships are specifically for you if that is an eligibility criteria that you fit. Now, with accommodation, there's this concept of bond. So, oftentimes our word is our bond, but in terms of the realm of finance, you also have some money, got to have some money to back you up. So as you move into a rental, they will most likely ask you for some bond. This is an amount of money. Typically, it will be a fortnight or 4 weeks of your standard rent. Now that money gets locked away and is only ever used by the landlord, the person who you're renting off, if for whatever reason there is some damage caused by you, or if you have any alterations or you break the contract of your accommodations. So on that note, have a look at rental bonds online. Rental bonds online is a New South Wales government service. As you're about to move in, you would get your ID number and a password for this service, and then you would send money from your bank account to Rental Bonds Online. And it'll then give you a certificate saying, yep, you paid your bond. It'll also send that to the landlord, the person you're renting off. And this is quite a secure way for your bond to be stored. What it means is that the landlord can't touch that money. They can't, take a little bit of that money unless they go through the processes set out by Rental Bonds Online and the New South Wales government to have access to those funds. So it's a safe and secure way to store that money. When you finish your contract, if you've abided by all the conditions and you've got cleaners in and you've left it close to how you moved in, then you can reasonably expect for most of, if not all of your bond to be returned. And that'll be sent from Rental Bonds Online to your nominated bank account. So that's quite a secure way to store your bond. So do have a look at that. More expenses. I've got them listed here and I'll unpack them in the slides to come. You've got your course and your tuition fees, so HECS and help there. I'll unpack that in a moment. Student services and amenities fees, textbooks, photocopying, printing, study materials, and resources. So in terms of your tuition fee, there's what's called a Commonwealth supported place. And that means that part of your course or part of your tuition fees is funded by and paid by the government. What's left is called the student contribution amount. So you don't need to apply separately for a Commonwealth supported place. If you're eligible, then you'll be considered when you apply for admission. So that portion that's left over after the government has contributed, the remaining part is called the student contribution amount. And you may be eligible to defer or delay that payment through what's called HECS Help. So HECS is the Higher Education Contribution Scheme and HELP is the Higher Education Loan Program. So in essence, you are getting a loan from the government to study. And you might be thinking, oh, gee whiz, when do I need to pay that back? Good thing to note is that you only need to start making repayments once you meet a certain threshold. And that for the financial year 2022-2023 is above $48,361. So if you earn less than that, you don't need to repay any of your HECS Help loan. So important to, or good to know there that you don't need to stress about making those repayments while you're studying. The SSAF, this is the Student Services and Amenities fee. This is for all the other extra pieces that offer on campus or as part of your university journey that isn't tuition. So these are different non-academic services and support programs, and it's charged at enrollment, but it's due on a different date to your tuition fee. So as an example, in 2022, if students were studying in semester 1, then it was due on the 2nd of June. If they were studying in semester 2, it was due on the 2nd of November. And as an example, for 2023 funds, then if you're a full-time student, you can expect to be paying approximately $163 for your student services and amenity fee. If you are a part-time student, you're looking at approximately $122.25. As you're studying, as you're on your university journey, there will be expenses that allow you to succeed at your studies. One of those will be textbooks. So as an example, we've got here Booktopia. You can search by the course code, which is super handy. So the name of the course that you're studying will have some kind of a code, probably letters and numbers. You'll type that in and it can show you some of the textbooks that you can expect you'll need, and then you can go ahead and purchase those. Lots of printing, typically at uni, printing assignments so that you can highlight different pieces, printing your readings so that you can highlight things that you might want to pull out and explore throughout your assessment pieces. So do keep that in mind. The library and the computer rooms with their printers, you can expect to pay approximately 10 cents for a black and white single-sided print. Other things associated. So you want to check out if your course has other materials. And so as an example here, and you can find this out on your course webpage, in the Bachelor of Architecture and Environments, and Sydney will be able to talk on this a little bit when she jumps up later. There's a cost roughly 115. This is for things like a materials kit, so timber, plastic, card, polypropylene, and toolkits. So as students are learning and they're making models of constructions or architecture settings, then you can expect that there will be a cost associated with that as well. So do keep an eye out on that and check that out. Like I mentioned, for myself studying science, I needed to buy a lab coat and I needed to buy some safety glasses. So you'll be able to get those from the University of Sydney Union store as well. So keep those in mind. So we're going to be hearing from Nate in a moment. But before that, I want to pop one of our poll questions up for you. So this one's one we've just done. So we'll check how you go with that. Here it is. So in terms of your tuition fees, do you need to pay your fees upfront, so before classes start, or do you need to start paying once you earn above a threshold amount, or you only need to pay as soon as you finish your degree? Cool, we've got our responses coming through. Excellent, we're all correct. 100% of you were saying you need to start paying once you've earned above a threshold amount. So that threshold for the HECS help loan is approximately $43,000. Cool. So I'm going to invite Nate up, and Nate will share his journey and his finance journey here at the University of Sydney. So welcome.
Thanks, Tyrone. Yes, so I mentioned before, guys, I study arts and law, and I'm coming towards the end of my degree. So in terms of my uni journey and my financial journey, actually, I started commuting. So I started, it was about an hour commute for me from home. Then I decided to get more involved in student life, and just for the convenience, I was working on campus at the time, and just for proximity to the city, which is where I wanted to work as well, I decided to move on campus. So I applied and I got a great scholarship at one of the residential colleges, and that's the primary reason why I moved on campus. But in terms of student life, I've been involved in lots of societies. That's a photo of me there when I was president of the USyd Writing Society. That society no longer exists, unfortunately, but it's fantastic to be part of a society like that with your friends. And that was pre-COVID, but there are lots of similar societies that have been built now. This is me, just sort of general uni experiences, but scholarships are really, really important. So what I'd like to drive home is that there are lots of different types of scholarships, and they all need to be applied to separately. So I received the most important ones for me were the Sydney Scholars Award, which I receive every year, which is fantastic, and you can apply for that. I'm not sure if the applications have closed yet for next year, but scholarships are great, and there are lots of scholarships that you can apply for once you're on campus as well, once you're already enrolled. There's lots of faculty specific and university scholarships, and as I mentioned before, residential scholarships for living on campus and bursaries have been fantastic for me. When I first moved on campus, I received a bursary, and then that was converted into an academic scholarship later on. So there are lots of opportunities like that. The key thing to remember, though, is that they're all separate applications. So you've got to make sure that you apply for each scholarship you're interested in. It's not just one bulk application. Yeah. Now, in terms of juggling uni with part-time work, because I'm not sure if it were any of you, but I wasn't bankrolled for my entire university journey. So it is important to often work part-time. And I think the key here for me, and my key tip, is making sure that whatever you work as, you keep flexibility. So so I worked with the Sydney Future Students team. So I've worked as a student ambassador there, which is fantastic. And I got that primarily through being a student rep. So getting involved on campus and just with student representation, student life generally, which has been great. It's very flexible. And in the same way, I applied to a casual role through the UCID Careers Hub. And that's another key tool that I'd encourage you to look into, where employers log on directly to a UCID specific website and say, look, we want UCID students to come and work for us in particular. And then you apply. It's just a great resource that I'd really recommend you using. I got my first, and I want to work in the law. I got my first law related job through that, which was fantastic. But again, I made sure that that was a casual role, so I could keep doing my best at university and juggling living expenses and getting some income with just the general student experience. Now, in terms of living on campus and those living expenses, there are a few things I just want to point out, just a sort of a general fun tip. If you're looking for food on campus, if you haven't prepared food when you're coming in, or if you're just out and you haven't prepared food, I strongly recommend you look at the USU or the University of Sydney Union lunchtime deals. They're often fantastic, as well as deals on King Street. King Street is full of Thai restaurants. If you like Thai, you're in luck. There are a whole ton of lunches you can get from $8 to $8 to $10. It's fantastic. You can just grab that with some friends in between lectures and tutorials. So I'd recommend you look into that. But the uni also has a wide range of living expenses support. So there's a lot of financial support that you can receive, both in terms of bursaries, which I talked about before. So if, for instance, you're struggling to pay your living expenses, then the uni can actually step in if you apply, and you can say, look, I really need a bursary, or they can help you out with subsidized accommodation, like Tyrone mentioned before. Career support is another great thing that the uni has. So in order for me to get that first job in the law, I went to a CV workshop where a member of the Career Centre helped me finalize my CV, tweak it, make sure that it was as appealing as possible, and highlighted my key strengths. So that's another great way to help you with those living expenses by getting a job in a field that you might be interested in. Having a personal fund, like Tyrone said, is really important. So I have my own, and I would recommend, as part of that, have a look into high interest savings accounts. Again, this isn't advice in particular. I have just really found them to be beneficial. So that there are a few banks who have high interest savings accounts, which are much better than anything you get at the moment. But with inflation, if you're saving, it's important to be putting that money into something that it's going to appreciate into, just so that you can keep paying those living expenses and enjoy the student experience without having your money to dwindle away. So that's probably my top tip. But again, I'll be around if you've got any questions in particular about my experience.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thanks, Nate. Alrighty. So we've had a look at expenses. We looked at unexpected expenses. We looked at living expenses and our expenses associated with study. We're going to look at income as well. So a number of things we'll look at. We'll look at income in general, including youth allowance, and we'll look at scholarships, bursaries, and I know gifts and prizes is there. We won't look at that one. But before we get into that, got a poll question for you. Let's have a look at poll question number 5. Alrighty. So in gross income is pay for doing dirty jobs. Is it pay before any deductions? Is it pay after any deductions? Is it dirty money? Have a think. Okay, nice. So it's pay after any deductions. Pay after any deductions. Okay. And one more poll before we move on. Poll question, here we go. So that was gross income. What is net income? Is net income pay that you get from fishing? Is it pay that you get to take home? Is it pay after any deductions? Or is it both take home pay and pay after deductions? Okay. So it's not pay from fishing. That was just for a bit of fun. But it is B and C. It's take home pay. So pay that's after any deductions is the pay that you're left with. That's the pay that you get to take home. Cool. So when we think about sources of income or sources of pay, look for scholarships, definitely, especially the E12 and the mySydney scholarship and payment. We'll have a look at that in a moment. And I'll touch on the tertiary access payment, which is for regional remote students, and that's from the government. But you also might have funds coming from your savings. So between now and when you start uni, you might work lots and lots and lots. So you could also have some funds from the work that you get, the job that you get when you're here in Sydney. And there's this thing called youth allowance, and I'll have a look at that in a moment too. So some of you will be E12 students, and that's the E12 scheme is not just a lowered ATAR, but it is also the scholarship for the money that comes with it. So it's paid in 2 installments, one in semester 1 and one in semester 2. And you need to be enrolled on the census dates. And so the census dates they are in the calendar. They are well documented, and the census date in semester 1 is the 31st of March. And so what that means is that census date is the last date to drop a unit without incurring financial, so not needing to pay, or academic failing or otherwise, that course. So if you are enrolled and studying after that date, then you will be eligible for that first payment, that semester 1 payment in the E12 scholarship. Same for semester 2, the date's there, the 31st of August. Now, you may have heard of the mySydney scheme. You might be eligible for the mySydney scheme. And so this is paid in 3 installments. That's during the first, and that's in the first year, that is. And so mySydney is the money for each year that you are studying. So the initial payment will come during Welcome Week. Welcome Week is the very first week, or the week just before classes start. Lots of things going on campus. There'll be an E12 and Broadway welcome. There'll be a mySydney welcome, so look out for those. Lots of fun and exciting things going on campus. As well, there'll be that initial payment from the mySydney scheme. The second payment comes after Census 1 census date, and that's $3,250. And the third payment is after semester 2 census date for $4,250. And so that money, that's there to support you in any way that you think that you need support. That money will go straight into your bank account. If you think that you need it for textbooks, you can spend it on textbooks. If you need it for fun and socializing with your family and your friends, and you need a meal out, you can spend it on that. If you need to just go to the beach and relax, you can use it to pay the public transport to get there. You know, when you get to the beach, you might, or as you're planning going to the beach, you might need some togs, some swimmers, and a towel. You can use that money to support you there. That's there to make things smoother and easier for you as you come and join us at the University of Sydney. Census dates there again, same census dates, no matter what you're studying. And if you're E12 or mySydney, same census dates. Now, this is for our regional remote students who are joining us. The government has money available for students as well. And so what you want to look out for is the relocation scholarship. And that's approximately $8,000 over 3 years. And that's to support you with your travel from regional areas and your relocation to Sydney. Tertiary access payment, about $5,000. And then the rural and regional enterprise scholarship up to $18,000. And so that one is aligned with more the STEM side of study and entrepreneurship. So if you're definitely keen to get on those, and I absolutely recommend if you're rural, regional, remote, do look into those. Those are the websites that you want to go to. And that money doesn't come from the uni, it comes from the Australian government through their Services Australia. So in terms of income is pay, and pay is in exchange for services rendered or tasks that you complete. And when you are looking at evaluating jobs, check if the pay is pre or post tax. And so you had a look at those questions earlier. So gross is before any deductions and tax. So most job ads will show you that, the gross income before tax. And then net is the money that you get to take home after there's been any deductions. So it's take home pay and after deductions, after tax. So youth allowance, this is for those who are between the age of 18 and 24, and you need to be studying full time. There are specific technicalities and conditions around that, being eligible for that, such as living away from your family home, different things like that. And so if you are looking at studying university or higher education next year, I absolutely recommend you start applying now. Often they will have a lead time or a lag time, and it'll be something like you apply and then only 10 weeks later do you start getting youth allowance. And so best to look into that and apply as early as possible. So youth allowance, that's funds coming from the government and funded through tax. And that is because, we want you to be highly educated. We want you to gain qualifications and experience, and then to be able to go out into the world and do good things and be productive and contribute to society in the ways that you want to, in the ways that you've been trained and skilled and have qualifications in. So that's how that kind of relates. So definitely look into that. All right, cool. The technical side of things, we'll look at budgeting, and then Sydney will jump on and we'll hear from her. So budgeting is a budget and budgeting is that concept of knowing where your money is going and making sure that you've got all your expenses covered. We spoke earlier when we looked at expenses. Some of them you need to pay before you use it. Some of them you need to pay while you're using it. Some of them you need to pay only after you've used it. So making sure that you've got those covered. And so a budget will look at things like the amount and the size of the expense or the income, because it is both those things. You've got to know how much is coming in so you can track how much is going out, or you can afford to go out. And good to have in your budget the dates that things need to be paid, or the date that your income is expected. If the date of your bill is on the 15th and you're expecting to be paid on the 20th, you're going to need to have funds available in some way, shape or form ahead of time, ahead of the 15th, ahead of when you get paid. So budgeting, we're looking at things like our groceries, our living expenses, and our utilities, things like electricity, gas and water. So this is a budget planner. This is coming from the moneysmart.gov.au website I mentioned earlier, and it has a range of things to assist you. And if we know how much is left over from our living expenses, then it means we know how much we can start building our emergency fund with, and how much we can start having fun with. And of course, if we're thinking ahead, how much we have available for investing. So you'll see a number of those things in this picture here from the moneysmart.gov website. They've got a budget planner there. You can go into income and you can pop in the amount. It'll pop in. You can pop in how much your home and your living and your utilities are costing, any kind of insurance, and that is one way to assist you with planning your funds and working out your budget. So in your budget, things to consider. Track your expenses through your banking app or a budgeting app. We saw the budgeting there on MyGov website. just ways to track it rather than pen and paper, or you might be an Excel spreadsheet wizard. That could be one way. Predict and list your income expenses for the next however many months. So you might look ahead and you might want to plan your budget for first semester. If you've got a job, how much money do you want to be working per week? And you'll be able to make that plan. Now that you know about some of the expenses associated with studying, you can plan those in as well. And you'll be able to plan to have your emergency fund as well. So if you've got financial goals, then do aim to periodically review and improve on your budget. As an example, if you are getting a $5 coffee every weekday, so that's $25 a week, that amounts to about $1,300 a year. And when I checked in preparation for this $1,300, that is a return flight to Fiji and a couple of nights accommodation. So it just depends on what is the bigger goal for you, the coffee or the travel. Also, you know, if you're paying $600 a week for rent, then $1,300 a year is just over a fortnight of money. So by planning it out that way and by reviewing in this way, you'll be able to make your own judgment calls ahead of time to see where you want your money to go and what you can budget for. Of course, if you don't have that extra $5 a day to spend, then you know that it won't be on your budget as an expense. So just like our budgeting of our funds, our finances, our money, we have a budget, we have a set limit or a limit for our time and our energy and our effort. We've definitely got a limit for our time, 24 hours a day, but depending on our lifestyles, we might have more energy or be able to put forward more effort, but within yourself, you'd have some sort of a cap there, some sort of a limit. And so we want to, I encourage you to think about how much time is associated with your university study, typically for the number of credit points associated with your course of study. With each unit or course, you might have 3 hours on campus or in class, and you might have 6 hours that you need to do of your own study. And so encourage you to make sure that you've got time and energy and effort for your studies. And you're not just, you know, spending 80% of your time working and only 20% of the time trying to get through all your uni work. Important to also have a balance and that recharge, which is the social. So definitely encourage you to jump in and look at our more than 200 clubs and societies. You just don't want to spend all your time on campus in clubs and societies and not doing any of your study or your uni work. So do think about that. So financial supports on campus, the Student Centre and the Student Life team ready and willing and able to assist you in the realm of finances and financial well-being. So if you've got any difficulty with finances and they're impacting your study, do contact the Student Life team and the Student Centre, and you can apply for financial support for your essential study and living costs. So bursaries, this is a financial allotment, and you don't need to pay it back. So it's not a loan, it's money to support you. You can also apply for a $250 voucher. You can do that twice per semester. If you're a E12 or My Sydney student, do mention that when you apply. You can also get an interest-free loan. So these are ways to support you while you're studying if your finances are in difficulty or they're impacting your ability to study. Now, you apply online via Sydney Student, and do keep in mind that you do need to provide supporting documentation. So you can't be there thinking, I've got 6 months worth of savings in my bank. Let me just see if I can get some extra money from the uni, because you would need to show that you are in that need of that financial support. Cool. So we've got our second student here from the University of Sydney. And so I'm going to welcome up Sydney to share with you her journey at the University of Sydney in the realm of finance and balancing study and living. So welcome, Sydney.
Hi, everyone. So just to reintroduce myself again, I'm Sydney. I'm in my third year here at USyd studying design computing and advanced studies. And I'm from Southwest Sydney, where I currently still live. But I chose to study at USyd because of the many opportunities it provides me to achieve my career goals in UX design, and because it sounds like I own the uni. So just to speak on, transitioning from high school to USyd, specifically the travel, I went to Freeman Catholic College in Bonnyrigg Heights, which is a suburb in Southwest Sydney. And it was a great school, especially because of how close it was to me, being only a 10-minute drive away from home. I practically could roll out of bed 30 minutes before and get to school right on time. So when deciding I wanted to go to USyd, I realized I'd have to adjust to a much different travel situation. To travel by car, it's around a 1 hour drive, but not super feasible for me because of the fuel and tolls, which are quite expensive for my student budget. So instead, I'd have to take public transport to USyd, which for myself would take around an hour and a half. 20 minutes to get to the station, 50-minute train ride, and then 10 to 20 minutes of walking, depending on where the class I'm taking is. So a concession Opal card is going to be your best friend if you're traveling on public transport. So applying for that is definitely a must if you don't already have one. So, when I've told some people at uni how long it takes me to get there, they're usually shocked. Like, people would ask me if I was going to move closer to uni, but I wish. I would love to not have to get up 3 hours before a class to get there on time. So other than worrying about how I'd have to go to sleep earlier now, I was also worried about finances. I applied to some scholarships like Sydney Scholars, but unfortunately I didn't receive any and I just missed out on qualifying for E12. But luckily, I was able to receive government assistance through HECS and other student help loans, which aided my concerns about paying for uni. And again, Centrelink schemes for students like Youth Allowance have also been a massive help with affording going to uni, for getting equipment needed for my degree, like a laptop, Adobe subscription, and so on. And I applied for that right when I got accepted into my degree, which was around January, before the year of starting. But any expense outside of university was not being, paid for or assisted. So I needed to find a job, which I eventually did as a student ambassador and casually in retail. This takes me to my next topic, which is money management and budgeting. Now, working while studying and also trying to have a social life is a very complex balance, especially if you're a casual worker like myself. Sometimes you can't predict the schedules, but you can always give a strict availability to your manager once you start. So in my case, I gave my manager, 3 days that they could roster me, and 2 of the other days in the week were for studying, apart from, before or after shifts. And the other 2 days were for a social life, which worked for me, but it might be different for everyone else. So this type of scheduling allowed me flexibility and the ability to balance all 3 aspects of my life in a way that was best for me. And I'm also lucky that I still get to live at home and don't have to, pay for rent or accommodation. So I don't have the same amount of bills and expenses that others may have. But to manage my money that I earned from work or saved, from youth allowance, I'd use the golden rule of splitting it. So half goes right into my saving and the other half stays in spending. But I keep a limit on my spending, which is never to have more than, $400 to $500 in that account for a whole week. So it ensures I don't go overboard with spending and that I have enough money for, food, travel, and small bills like gym membership. But it also helps to save, to have goals to save for. So for example, like myself and Nate said, like going on exchange, that's a good goal to have to ensure you have, some saving goals there. So overall, like the 3 practical actions that, you should take as a high school student from now in terms of finance is to first start researching your eligibility for financial schemes like scholarships, E12, government, or Centrelink assistance, and start applying for it when you can. The second is to start organizing your life and how you want to balance university with work and social life. And third is to start planning. So start planning what your spending might look like whilst at uni and how to budget for this. So for example, train trips, meals on campus, and materials for your course. So I hope you can learn from my experience and take something valuable away from it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sydney. We are getting towards the end of our webinar tonight. So again, thanks for being with us. Shortly, we'll have our live Q&A. So if you've got any questions that have been coming to the service and you want us to answer those live, do pop those into the Q&A function at the top of your Zoom function there. And we've also got our last poll question. Here it is. So in relation to money and finances, what is compounding? Is it the metallurgical process of combining metals to make coins? Is it the eighth wonder of the world? Is it a process whereby the interest earned on capital begins to itself earn interest? Or is it both? The second and third answer there. So what are you thinking? All right, cool. And here are our results. So compounding, it is both B and C. It was Albert Einstein who said that compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. And it's also a process whereby interest earned on capital begins to itself earn interest. So I've got a bit of a diagram here for you in terms of compounding. So let's imagine that we start off with $5,000, and this is simply as an example. Typical interest rate, about 5% is quite conservative. And so we're assuming our plan is for 10 years, and we're going to put $1,000 into an investment each year for those 10 years. So after 10 years, and you can get the compound interest calculator through our moneysmart.gov website, after 10 years, we can see how our money has grown. So it's not just our $5,000 and $10,000 that's been earning money. So the initial deposit being $5,000, regular deposit across the years, $1,000 per year is $10,000, but we've earned interest of $5,722. So if it was just our $5,000 and that earned interest for a year, and then we go and spend that interest, the next year, it would still only be $5,000 interest. However, if we reinvest the interest earned, that interest will start earning interest in year 2. In year 3, our $1,000 plus $5,000 plus all the interest starts earning interest. And so this isn't a linear line, a linear graph, it becomes exponential. So the longer it runs for, the longer the plan is, then the more you will see that exponential growth. So the reason I bring that up, not just because it is the eighth wonder of the world, but because we're looking at our financial pitfalls. So these are things to watch out for, things to prevent, and things to avoid. This will be our second last slide. So you want to avoid payday lending. So often, there's too much week at the end of the money. You may find yourself running out of funds a couple of days before you get paid. So payday lendings, they are there to fill that gap. However, they have very, very high interest rates. So definitely encourage you to avoid those. Deferring payments, we've got Zip, we've got Afterpay, we've got this, that, and the other thing. That's all well and good, it's got its purposes, but I do encourage you to avoid doing that without that conscious thought or that plan, that budgeting of when and how you're going to repay. Compounding debt. So just as our investment there exponentially grew because of interest earning interest, our debt can also do the same thing. So if you have a credit card surcharge or a credit card fee and you don't pay it off at the end of the month, not only do you need to pay interest on your expense, the fee, the amount that you didn't pay also starts earning interest. So our debt can rapidly go exponential as well, just like our interest with our investments can. so can our debt. So I definitely encourage you to watch out for that. Late fees. Sometimes you might really love the library book you're reading and you just get held up or different things like that. And so unfortunately, you've got a 50-cent fee at the library. If you do that once a month, after a year, you're going to have $6 worth of fees. So that's an expense that you could have used more productively. Of course, that's a simple example with your library book. Those late fees get bigger and bigger when they're a bigger and bigger expense, like a fee for a washing machine, or like a fee for our utilities. This one is something that I have happened to sometimes get caught up with. Buying things that are on sale, even if I don't need it, even if it doesn't fit my budget, just because it's on sale. So I do encourage you to be careful there. So tips and tricks. E12 comes with a University of Sydney Union membership card. You can also sign up and pay to become a member. That gives you 10% across a number of campus outlets, food and drinks. So have a look at that, coffees as well. Use your student card for discounts. So Sydney mentioned the discounts with transport. Do look into that. Tips. So if you live further away, it may be handy for you to have a job on campus. That way you can study and work in the same place before heading home, instead of needing to head to study and then travel somewhere else. So that's a tip for you. Do use rental bonds online to safely lodge your bond receipt, and have a safety net in case you get caught up with different things. Having that safety net, that way you don't need to use a credit card, you don't need to use a payday lender, because you've got your safety net there. There's free legal services, so do have a look for community legal centres. Mention you're a student, they can look to support you with free legal advice. So have a look at those tips there. We're going to have a live Q&A for a minute or two, and then that'll be the end of our webinar. So I will invite Sydney and Nate back on screen. We'll have a dabble in one or two of the questions that we've got. All righty. So question for you, Sydney. How did you go about determining that you would catch the train instead of, say, buses? How did you go with that?
So for myself, I would check the Transport New South Wales website, see what lines I can catch and all of that. And just for convenience, and I guess to reduce the amount of time it would take me to travel, it was easier to just drive to the station and take the train all the way to uni, rather than the bus. But it definitely just depends on where you're living and what's available and accessible. Yeah.
Beautiful. And question for you, Nate. We saw some great photos of you with your mates and your buddies in the clubs and societies. Were they completely free, or did you happen to have a fee that you needed to pay? And what was the purpose in that fee? How would that support the club and society?
So yes, so the Writing Society I refounded. So the USU will give funding to societies. So often a lot of societies won't actually have membership fees. A lot of the main ones, so you think of, say, the Sydney Art Society, the Science Society, those sort of societies, they won't have fees. But those that do, so for the Writing Society, we made ours $5 joining fee. And that just gets fed into things like big group pizza nights, where we get together, have a writing workshop, or have a great author come and talk to us about what it's like to write a novel. We'd have a chat about it, have like I said, like a pizza night. So all the money would just come into initiatives like that, paying for those particular initiatives. None of it ever gets pocketed by the student leaders. And if it is, that's a big problem. So that just doesn't happen. It goes right back into student events. So if you're hesitant, I mean, I remember I spent, it could have been $50 on my first day, just in sign-up fees. It's often better to go out on, say, in Welcome Week. You can go past all the student societies and just apply to all of them. Pay that $5, $2, whatever it is, and then you can always slim down. But yeah,
beautiful. So we've got a question here to be answered live. So the question is, for the E12 scheme, I need a 89 ATAR to get in. Is this with adjustment factors? Good question, good question. So with the E12 scheme, that is a raw ATAR. So that's just your ATAR, no adjustment factors, no bonus points. It's just your ATAR. So if you need an ATAR of 70 in the E12 scheme, that's just your ATAR. If you need an ATAR of 89, as the question asks, then it's you need to have got and achieved an ATAR of 89 without bonus points or adjustment factors. Cool. One last question for you, Sydney. Do you have a favorite place on campus for coffee or for food?
On campus, it might be pretty basic amongst the student community, but I would say Unibros is my favorite place to eat on campus. They have some really good Turkish, I'm pretty sure, or Middle Eastern food, pies, all of that. And it's pretty cheap as well. So definitely, if you come to USyd, give them a try.
Awesome, sweet. Thank you, Sydney. Thank you, Nate. So I just want to let our attendees know we have Info Day coming up. It's on the 16th of December. Myself, I'll be there. We'll have lots of our student ambassadors there. So that'll be once you know what your ATAR is, if you've got any questions about what you can go on to study or how that'll work with you or how the university can support you anyway, come along to that. There'll be talks and tours of the campus. If you're thinking about studying law, you'll be able to have a chat with people from the law faculty. If you're thinking about studying science or UX design like Sydney, you'll be able to have a chat with people from architecture, design and planning, or you'll be able to have a chat with people from the science faculty as well. So there'll be lots going on. And do look out for during Welcome Week, which is the week just before class starts. Have a look out for the E12 and the Broadway Welcome and the My Sydney Welcome as well. So thank you very much for taking the initiative, stepping in, stepping out, stepping up to come along and join this Money Matters webinar. And I wish you all the very best for your future and your study journey. So this is the end of the week, end of the webinar. We hope to see you at Info Day. So have a good night. Cheers.